this bar, so you can say this however you please. You can have this as any name. We call it lots of different names. It's been 3 years that I've been with the bar, and I don't use the same name. Lots of people call it Shapes. I call it Bauhaus sometimes. Some people say that Bauhaus bar. Some people say that bar with Shapes to a name. Like, in different countries it changes, and that's actually a really fun thing about the name is we did it so that every country you're in, wherever you are, you can choose whatever you want to call this. You can call it Remy's bar. You can say Maria's bar. It's not my bar. I'm the red square. And yeah, so it means in different countries it changes. It's quite sweet to see how much it changes. I'm Greek, and for some reason in Greece, they only call it Little Circle Bar. I don't know why. They miss out the other shapes. It's kind of frustrating because I'm the square, so they should honor that a little bit. But today I want to talk about my School of Flavour. Ooh, that is some good rain. The School of Flavour is not something that is open yet. The School of Flavour is a project that I want to work on because 3 years ago, when I sat down with Remy and Paul to talk to them about what it is that they wanted to do with their bar, they were very open in having a conversation with me about why it is that I wanted to start there, what I planned to do. They were very, very open to anything. If I said that I wanted to leave in a year's time to open my own bar, they would have been supportive of that. But something that they were very supportive of was I wanted to sit there and actually be taught a little bit and had a conversation about art. Because it was really confusing at the time to see all of these posts saying, we're opening a bar based on an art movement. And that's kind of different to a concept. That's a little bit strange in the sense, oh, that's cute. I have my own little cloud. Okay, well, free water. Can't stop the nature. I'll stand on this side. So that's actually kind of poetic. Yeah, so the School of Flavour is something that I said that I wanted to do because I am from the Southwest, and in the Southwest, we are a little bit behind, especially in the bartending community. My first 2 years in bars, so I think when I was maybe 19, turning 20, I started in a bar. I got made redundant 5 times in 2 years. So I started in bars, I would be bar backing for 6 months, and then the place would close down. And I'd have to close a bar that I had just fallen in love with, and I never got to make it to the bar making drinks. And then I'd start in the next bar. They would hire me because they felt bad that I didn't get to bartend, and then they would close down. And that happens to you 5 times, and you really start to think like a cloud is following you, and that it's just gonna rain on you everywhere you go. It was really difficult trying to kind of like find my roots and find a space, and I'd been in this bar environment now for so long and not being able to make anything. It was constantly like running around, being a heavyweight, learning to bar back, which was insane, and I loved it. And I think there's like a real honorary skill to it. But eventually I did nearly consider leaving because I wanted to be a chef as well. And when I talked to a chef, the first chef I spoke to wasn't very nice. He told me I was too small and I was too emotional to be working in kitchens. He said I was too much of a fun personality, so I should go be a waitress. I told him I had horrible balance and really bad with the tray. I think on our first night of opening the bar, I smashed like 1 tray of like 200 pounds worth of glassware, and then I got put on the bar. But yeah, my title is Chief Education Advisor, which is something that we chose recently for my title, because before I was bar manager, and as my role was changing and I was taking on less responsibility of managing the team, and it was becoming a role that was kind of getting a bit big for what I wanted to do, we said it'd just be fun to have whatever title I wanted. So I said, for sure I want to be chief, like I want it to be chief of something, and then I guess the plan is to be bringing education into the bar, and then in the grand future to be bringing education, especially of flavor, into schools, amongst children, like in all platforms that we can. So this is going to be a little bit of a conversation about what it is to be bartenders and where we are inspired. So for me, and I think for a lot of people in this room, I hope everyone in this room, art is like fundamentally the most important thing in the world. And I think we don't look enough to art because there's still a little bit of shame. We are moving out of it, but there's a little bit of shame when we as bartenders talk about what it is that we're interested in. Like, we want to be the best bartender, but what does that mean? We want to be inspired, but what does that mean? We're not looking at the everyday design around us. We're not looking at the art around us to be the thing that's inspiring. It's really nice when you choose like a focus and a concept for the drinks that you want to make. When you say like, okay, cool, I found this house that I find inspiring, so I want to make a drink based on that house. The house was a kind of beige and it was made of mosaic tile. And then you can find ways to say like, okay, I'm only going to use vegetables that grow naturally square because I want to represent the tile. And you can really run with it and you can really, really spin with it. But we can do that with everything so long as we're inspired. So I don't know enough people who take the time to visit exhibitions or to go and see art or to go and support local artists or to even actually take a moment in their everyday to look at the buildings around them or to think about the chair that they're sat on and to wonder how it was designed, how it was crafted. Because ultimately, we're people who use our hands. So when you're someone who uses your hands, you are a craft artist. I stand here in this funny jumpsuit. This is the uniform of the bar because it's based off of a mechanic's uniform. Because in the Bauhaus, there was a teacher that said, we should be wearing something that covers all of us. Because why are we stood around in these fancy shirts and these bow ties when actually, like, I'm going to be doing a class that's going to be about art? When you're on stage in your bar, when you are behind your bar, you're going to be using your hands. You're probably going to get messy. I can't explain why, but I always end up with stains on the back of my legs. And I don't know how I do it, but I do. And like to the point where there's been bleach sometimes I've been cleaning and somehow it's gotten there. So our capacity for environment versus culture is, because I grew up in this small town in the Southwest, I felt like when I was at school, I didn't learn enough about how I should be feeling around the beautiful world around me. So because I didn't learn that, and also I grew up as like one of 4 other cultures in my school. So my school was the one school of the town for the whole city. So there's loads of us, but it's a very big like concentration of white Southwest Devonian kids whose family have had generations of farms in the Southwest. But then it meant when I was older and I moved to London, I was terrified because I felt like my internal box, like my inner box and capacity for culture was really small. When I moved to London, it was the first time I'd met somebody from Italy. Like, that never happened to me. I was like, oh, whoa, you're kind of near from where I'm near. And I'd only ever been to Greece, where I grew up, and Devon. The first time I came to London and I met people of other cultures, that was crazy to me because I got to really see how it is that other people see beauty in the world. Like people wanting to come and bring you food, I think that's the cutest thing in the world. Like people wanting to bring you a snack, somebody making you a drink is a very kind of like emotional moment. And anything that evokes an emotion is art. I think that's the whole point of it. Every day when we make a drink, every day when we work something, you've put a little bit of yourself into that drink, but also your intention was to evoke a feeling. You either want someone to be impressed by it, you want them to feel nostalgic, you want them to have a moment to really kind of appreciate that. Or you make it because you want it to be the channel and the vessel for somebody to have their own moment. But regardless of that, we're creating a timescape. We're creating something, an existing moment that's just for that person or those people and their company. What we're doing is an art. So we need to be inspired by the art around us. And currently, Flavour isn't taught in our curriculum at school. So art, even then, when we were taught as kids, didn't really come until later on. Maybe there was a little bit of sensory play in the sense of like, you play with paints, but you don't really ever learn about the emotion that you use around that or why it makes you feel sad when you put certain colors together or like the way that you were interacting with art as a child probably wasn't explained to you or given you enough space to feel how you felt and resonated with that art. Art wasn't ever taught to us in a way that it could be in the future. We were never told to really like admire and take into how beautiful this castle is and how great stonemasonry is. We were never, until yesterday, everybody I'm sure was really impressed at the Cooperage because you got to see someone crafting something and we're really kind of losing touch with people who are using your hands. You never get to meet people who are doing pottery, who are doing woodwork, who are doing metalwork. And the bar that I work in celebrates the kind of like original craft and design school. So kindergarten. Kindergarten is a really fun word. Kindergarten is still, I think, on a grand scale, a very young notion. So the first kindergarten was in Germany. It was designed by a guy called Frederick Frobel. I think it was in the late 1800s. His whole idea was he really believed that like children are the future. So children are the seed that like we as protectors, as the older generation, we have to make the fruition of the seed. We have to turn these children into the flowers that they can become. But we don't turn them by telling them. We turn them by giving them the environment. We make sure that their environment is really a garden to play in. Whenever I say that I'm making things, I always say like, oh, okay, like I'm playing with ginger. And at first I always thought that was a language thing. And then I realized it was actually because when there's no rules, it is playing. Like everything when we're making drinks is about the playfulness of design and using the nature around us. Whenever we're distilling stuff in the bar, I'll make everyone in the bar, like I'll make them squish whatever we're about to use first. So like if we're gonna start distilling some blueberries and we're trying to decide how long we macerate for, I'll make them physically squish it. Because the squishier something is, the less time it can have to macerate because whatever, science stuff. but I'll make them squish it because it's fun, because it's really introducing, like, the first step of creating is playing, and the first step of school is kindergarten. So when you're a very young age, you go to your kindergarten, that's where you first start to learn to play. But flavor can be used in this element. Flavor can be something that's introduced into kindergarten. I don't really remember, like, eating anything or, like, drinking anything in kindergarten, except for one day when it was, like, I think we were maybe celebrating Chinese New Year, and we had noodles, and I thought that was the best day, but it was the first thing that I remember eating in kindergarten. What I do remember is, and I'm not sure if it's worked, but I've tried to make the tent smell like jasmine because I wanted it to smell like the first gardens that I was in. But I don't think that's worked. There is a drink coming out later that does smell of jasmine, so we'll have that opportunity to have a moment together. But play in education is an important part, and the future of flavor will be teaching about flavor into schools at a kindergarten level. But what that means now is that I need, like, a very big global hand to make a collection and a database, and I need everybody to kind of be on board with creating a curriculum that we can apply into schools. Because to create a curriculum, we have to have, like, an elementary knowledge and a primary start. There has to be just some start. We talk about primary colors in my bar. We say there's red, yellow, and blue. Those colors make up everything. But at first, we have to distinguish what is red, yellow, and blue in terms of flavor. We have to start working on those primary flavors and primary expressions so that we can teach. Oh, so good, thank you. Little drinks coming around. I work in a bar based on Bauhaus, and I think it's always, I do have to do a bit of explaining every day to tell a little bit about what this was, because why would anyone know unless you study design? Unless you study design or architecture. So 100 years ago, there was a school called the Bauhaus. I think Remy will talk about it later in a bit more extent. The parts that I want to cover, I'll keep them nice and simple. I forgot I added that. I would really love to sell bao buns in the bar because I think it would make a really good snack. It's all one thing contained. It's a building. Architecture was considered the most beautiful form of beauty in the Bauhaus. It was a school made just over 100 years ago. It was one of the first schools to say that women could join, which was kind of cool. Back then, women weren't allowed to study art because they thought in 2D and whatever. We do think in 3D. That was such a weird, I read about this because it was actually the founder of Bauhaus who said, like, oh, like, women think in 2D, which is what makes them such great mathematicians and such great engineers, and men think in 3D, which is why they're such great fine artists, but they weren't letting women paint. It's like, well, maybe just give them paint and they'll paint stuff. There's no right or wrong in art, it's entirely subjective. So it's a school 100 years ago that started in Weimar in Germany. It did move 3 times. It was actually a relatively young and short stretch for a school. It was only around for 13 years before it moved into other countries. It was forced out of Germany during World War II. But we talk about the Bauhaus and we'll talk about art movements a lot because this was the first kind of school of design where it was positioned between fine art schools and design schools and applied art schools. So they wanted to make a craft school in the middle. So when we talk about pure art or fine art, when we talk about design and applied, you're kind of separating artists. People would say, like, oh, fine art is for the fancy, for people of a high class, for people that are more intelligent, intellectual, and then design is for your, like, everyday craftsperson. And it doesn't have to be that. It can be a join of the two. The whole point of Bauhaus was something should be as beautiful as it is functional. So something doesn't need to have the frill of other things. There is a time and a place for that, but Bauhaus was a lot about the minimalism and not about adding accessories. It should be beautiful, but it should also follow its form. There doesn't need to be the maximalism of frill. It moved to its first, so this is actually, this is it when it moved to Dessau. Fun fact, it's a whole school based on design, and then after they designed the school, they realized it was bad design because half of it was glass. They were like, yeah, it's beautiful, it's gonna be amazing, it's gonna, like, self-contain the heat of the building, and then they learned that it's really cold in the winter, and it's too hot for them to work in the summer. So I think that was a nice thing for them to own up to and say, like, oh, the whole thing is design, and we designed something bad. And that happens a lot. So this is the curriculum that they were using in the Bauhaus. So this is kind of what it looked like, and it was this wheel to say what your 3-year course at the Bauhaus was going to be. So at first you start with a primary course, you start with your foundation skills. So now, I don't know if you would have seen when you were going to college, there's something called a foundation course. That started because of Bauhaus. So the foundation course was really about going back to the basics of art. It was talking about color theory and it was talking about basic form. And I think as bartenders, we could really benefit from learning a little bit more about the relationships of colors and how they play and how they influence us. And also about learning about like what forms work nice, what we find appealing, and also playing for what works with you in that sense. Like for me, I'm a real stickler for, I love how stools line up in a bar, because you can be really fun with it. There doesn't always have to be a straight line. A straight line is beautiful, but it's also nice when you add more movement into a room. And when you start to look at basic lines, basic colors, how we interact with them and how we play with them. And even asking your friends like, oh, when I give you this, what do you think? What do you feel? How do you feel? I did a study a couple months ago about the color red, how we all feel about the color red. What are the emotions that you feel around the color red? What are the flavors that you think about the color red? And it changes so much on a global level. When I asked people from Eastern Europe what flavors they thought of when it came to red, they said cinnamon. When I asked somebody from South America, they said chili. When I asked somebody from North America, they said raspberry. When I asked somebody from Greece and from Spain, they said tomatoes and red peppers. And it changed so dramatically. It also changes a lot in the feeling. So when we think of the color red, we think of strength, we think of passion, we think of emotion, we think of love, we think of violence, we think of sex. Like we think of so much when we think of the color red. And yet we don't apply that into how drinks might come out. The first like visual sense that we have from a garnish, the first visual sense that we have from a drink, that first experience when you walk into a space and the lighting is maybe too dark, too light. Why are we not playing with additional lighting? When you start to really go into the works of it, that's like a primary part of design that we haven't touched upon. And I think it would make our drinks and our experience a little bit more wholesome, a little bit more interesting if we started to learn a little bit more about art so that we can feel something more with the work that we're making and with the experience that we're going to give. We have a light in the bar that's changing every 15 minutes, and it's 2 different color waves of light. So it means that every time you're in there, your experience is a little bit different, because sometimes you'll be sat in front of a light that's yellow and blue, and sometimes it will change into a red. And the whole time, it's really fun if you go in there and you get to watch how people change. All of a sudden, people start getting more like heated conversations. They all start kissing. It's very intense. And then it's about study of nature, study of tools. So when we would apply this into flavor, maybe it's that we learn to use our tools a little bit better. How is it that we're using A, ourselves, body, mind, soul? B, how are we using the tools that we use for extraction of flavor? So home that has a little squiggle that says flavor. And where would flavor fit if we were to consider it one of the primary disciplines of art? So like, where would we put this? You could kind of put it in every category, but if you put flavor in here, like next to clay, glass, color, textiles, I think that's something that I really do want to celebrate is flavor can fit within that. If I were to go to a design school, I would want to learn about why my senses are impactful for the materials that I use. So what's the goal? It's a really big thing to say, like, I'm going to open a school. That's terrifying, because that's really going to mold a lot of the future of how we think as the generation now. We have so much time left to do so many beautiful things. Like, I love to meet, especially, like, honestly, I'm so in love with the Master Cooper from yesterday. So in love, because it's really great to see craft still happening. But I think the aim is that one day we introduce this in a school platform, so at a kindergarten, at elementary level, small scale, maybe we just start it in London. That's way more in the future. Right now, it's about opening up to bartenders, opening it up to my friends, opening it up to people who come to the bar. At the bar, we run a blind tasting every year, so we only have 20 bottles on the bar, and we just have 1 gin, 1 vodka, 1 rum, and everybody is invited to come along with it. Anybody who wants to come along to it can. Brand ambassadors can come along to it. They just can't choose for their category, because they'll be able to choose their own run out. And then we choose things entirely blind, because then it's a bit of a study of like, well, the people have said this is categorically the most delicious one that they would want to apply to a drink. People that work in drinks, people that work in food, people that don't, they're all invited to this blind tasting so that we can really kind of like choose the beginning of how is it that we interact with the flavors that already exist. And then later we talk about extraction. But it is really about collecting as much data as we can so that we can build a library that we can share with everyone so we can see what people around the world do. It breaks my heart when people change the specs to share with someone else. It's like, oh yeah, I'll give you my syrup recipe for this, but they've changed it. And I think that's really weird to have this like kind of self-entitlement over a thing. I know that you want it to be the best experience for when someone is interacting with you, but the whole point of sharing is like, it's okay to be wrong, or it's okay for someone to expand on it. Because when someone expands on it, if they make it better than you, that's a wonderful outcome. If somebody can make something more delicious that you then ended up interacting with it in a way that you were like, oh, whoa, that's really cool, and I didn't know that. You're now learning something, they've learned something, someone else will learn something by that. Also, someone out there will study the difference between the two. Someone will say, why did it change so much when this was added or when this was extracted in a certain way? So we're really kind of opening the game to have this big library. We all work in bars, we all love to chat, and we should chat more about those kind of like smaller nerdy things. Or I love asking people like, I want to start working on drinks with carrots. So like I'll put a message out to be like, who's worked on carrots? And then you find loads of people who are really open to share all of that data. So then you just need someone to input it somewhere. How are we doing? Great. So year one is about learning, connecting, and the library. So learning is, I absolutely do not have the accreditation to be a teacher. I actually don't make a good teacher. I have really horrible time management skills. I was talking to you about this. Anna is studying to be a teacher, and I think that's wonderful. I don't think I necessarily have the idea to be a teacher at the level that I would want to be, say, for children, but I do meet people in my life who I'm like, oh my God, you should teach us, you should teach anybody that wants to come along. So the first part is learning. So learning how it is that we extract, learning how we use flavor, learning and collecting. Connecting is about meeting people like in this room today, where I can meet someone and they'll say like, oh yeah, this is really cool to be drinking PX and smoked beetroot. I love working with beetroot, but I've never considered smoking it. I've always used all of the sugars in it. I love to use the sugars. I've never tried to apply something to that. So then you end up having more conversations. Connecting in spaces like this, especially when you're connecting with a global group of people, is amazing. Library is about making that library. So right now we're learning how to use our tools. We're learning how to talk to each other. We're learning how to make friends. I think that's really sweet. Connecting is about using that and creating the global community. And then the library is going to be about the database that we hold it all in. So at the bar, we use something called Ethel, which is where we upload all of our ingredients, all of our recipes, all of our drinks, all of our techniques, all of our method. And then one day the plan is to have this as an open source of information. Because like a library, everybody should be able to go in, everybody should be able to learn, and everybody should be able to upload and comment. So part of the school in its first year is to not only celebrate people who work in flavor, but for it to be an equal balance between a craftsperson and an artist. So maybe actually we'll find inspiration. If I have a woman who comes in and she talks about textiles, you'll go to a class, you will learn about why it's really cool that she's dedicated her life and her career to using weaving as an art form. And then maybe from that you become inspired about how it is that we apply textures to drinks. Maybe you go to this and you listen to somebody else talk and use wonderful vocabulary about the craft that they do, and you get to see it applied in front of you, that you then become inspired to do something that you end up making into a drink. It doesn't have to be part of the story of the drink, but the point is that it inspired you. And if you have an equal balance of, okay, semester one is textiles and pastry. So we have somebody who is a professional who comes and talks from a pastry background. I think pastry chefs are wonderful to talk to because they really understand sugars and fats in a way that's really cool. And I love using sugars and fats. I think sugars and fats are great. So it'll be a joint collection between people who are already doing something in art that we haven't been exposed to yet, and then also celebrating somebody that works within our niche. Just because we work in drinks doesn't mean that we shouldn't celebrate chefs, doesn't mean that we shouldn't celebrate people in perfumery and the other senses when we apply a discard to something. So I think, is my drink going around? Oh, so good. So this should have a different aroma to the flavor that you're experiencing, because I love working with perfumists. I think people who study aroma are so fascinating. More because I really love smoke and flowers. So this drink is supposed to be a little bit of a portrayal of smoke and flowers. I think smoke and flowers are two very challenging flavors to work with because they're very intense. When you think of flowers, you think of like lavender, you think of soap, you think of maybe having something that was too intense first time round and then you never want to get back to it. You think of rose, which is maybe too sweet, and then you only think of Turkish delight, but then you're not thinking of pure rose. When you think of smoke, you're maybe thinking about breaking into the first cupboard when you were 15 and stealing some whiskey that was maybe too smoky. So it's about kind of opening that up and playing with how it is that we extract those flavors and hopefully making something delicious out of them. Doop doop. We want to make the bar a 24-hour space. Hopefully lots of you have, what? And like, we're so serious by that. We really do want it to be a 24-hour space. We were very lucky to land in a bar that has a 5 a.m. license, which is kind of non-existent in London. So we're open till 4 a.m. because we did 2 years of 5 a.m. and it was a big party. So the whole point of the 24-hour space is so that it can be a school in the day and a place to play at night. Like, it is a bar space where you get to express everything that you've learned in the day. You can come to school, and then after school, you can go to the bar. And that will be the whole point, is in the daytime, we'll maybe run something in the morning that helps to study. Maybe we'll have like coffee mornings, maybe we'll have school in the afternoon, and then the bar opens at 5 o'clock. Everyone's there to chill out. You have your school day, work is done. This will be hopefully something that we can make happen in the next year. I think it'd be really, we can make this work, right? So Remy's here now. Hello, Remy. So I do really want to highlight that the future of the school is about learning, connecting, and then manufacturing this experience that we can introduce into schools. Schools is something that will happen way down in the line. Schools will happen as part of a bigger project with so many more people. I think it starts with people like us who are working in what is considered a small team now, and then it will be working with like education boards, working with actual teachers, working with such a big global community about how we can apply it. Maybe there's cities that want to do it first. Maybe there's people who are more opening to trialing it first. So the future is the long game about how it is that we will teach children to be able to express themselves and to be able to express their art with the senses that they're already using. Like, I don't know if anybody else remembers the first intense smell they ever had. One of mine, there's two. There's like a nice one. So the first smell I remember is jasmine. The second smell I remember in the worst way was baked beans. I have like an irrational fear of baked beans because I once smelt too much of it. And I think it's going to be about utilizing the beauty of flavor around us into schools at this level. But right now I need everyone's help in like sharing everything you've ever learned about a tool that you use. So I did want to talk to you very quickly about Ethel. So we have a library that one day will be an open access. Right now I have this plan that in 5 years' time I want to make 1,000 extractions, which is actually really big. 1,000 is so many. I just said like 1,000 in 5 years, that's doable. It's really hard. So I will need other people's help on this. So it kind of looks a little bit like this. So like these are cocktails that we currently have on our menu. And then when you open them up, you can start to see like breakdown of ingredients. So the tea that is being used today, so we use Rare Tea Jasmine, which is a wonderful tea company that we work with. You can have your ingredients priced, your weight, your yield. We do everything in the bar by weight, just because we do make such volume of it that we have to do everything out of weight to be consistent, because just eyeballing something on a jug is really hard to do when you're making 200 liters of it. So weight is really important in the bar. And then we also have our extraction methods, instructions. So it's important to have instructions on all of it. Once we teach a language around how we write our recipes, if there's a consistent form that everyone can use to write their recipes, then it means you can kind of get the data better, you can get it more efficient, you can get it quicker. It's not about creating a machine, but it is about creating a catalog. Like, I think things like Difford's Guide are wonderful because it really is a catalog of where it is that we can find all of the drinks, but that's the art that's already made. We need to talk about the materials. The Bauhaus talked a lot about how the building is the most beautiful thing, but to have a building, you have to have perfect rooms. To have perfect rooms, you have to have perfect things. To have perfect things, you have to have perfect materials, and drinks are exactly the same. To have a perfect bar, you need to have a wonderful space. You need to have excellent drinks, and you need to have incredible ingredients. That's what will make your bar thrive. Once you have that, then you fill it with people, and it's an amazing time. You've made like the purest art at that point. You can add on to all of this your equipment. So equipment gets added onto it. Then you can have people that say, oh, actually, like when I centrifuge things that have this kind of weight or this kind of fat content, whatever, you can have people adding into this. So like this is just the basic outline of it, but people can then start to add more categories. Like actually, I was talking to a guy who does, it's kind of like switching. It's the guys up north in Edinburgh, and yeah, north from here. Sorry, I feel like it's London time. But about using like thermodynamics in the sense of chirodynamics, so how it is that we freeze things and how things interact once they've been frozen. So that could be something that's added onto it. And yeah, and then also adding things like dashes and drops. I think that's an important thing to add into stuff, that we start to have the weight so that we can understand how it is that we're batching in bigger quantities better. Because once you have something like this, people can start to make it in their own bars. I work a lot with our sister bar in Paris with the twins. And one of the things that we were saying is, I said, yeah, I'm having a bit of a tough time because I've got to go to the warehouse to distill something and it's a little bit far away and I'm feeling a bit lazy. She was like, just send me the recipe and I can do it from here. And then I can make something with it. And I was like, this is how it starts. This is the school. And it's about sharing those ingredients with everyone. So saying, I worked on this thing. Would you mind to try it? I think that's so playful. And that's where school will start. It will start with those moments of connection that are about all of us sharing our ideas and sharing our ingredients. And then one day it will formulate to where you can come to the bar, a 24-hour space. You can spend some time to learn. It can be something that is a subscription. The actual details of how the school run aren't the important thing right now. It will just be about the access of it. It needs to be accessible, and it needs to really hone in that people are allowed to celebrate what they find beautiful. It's entirely subjective, and there is no wrong. Whatever you find beautiful isn't wrong. You just have to find your way to be able to express it. I always get really emotional and embarrassed when I have to talk about my art. I make drinks by painting, and that's always quite a vulnerable thing to show people when I say like, when I drink this drink, sometimes when I drink this one in particular, if the purple isn't intense enough, I feel like maybe the painting isn't beautiful. And it is. Someone will find it beautiful. When you align them all next to each other, someone will think that's interesting. But when it's yours, you will feel emotional and you will feel very humble about it. But we just kind of have to get over this barrier where we do become more social, because we are constantly social. But we need to find a way to be social that benefits us as well, instead of it being for everyone else. Sorry, this is a dilution calculator. Don't know why I included this. I think it's handy to know. It's how we do ABV. That's been me on my School of Flavour. Ask me so much stuff later. I would really, really love to thank Tony for just being, like, everyone's going to say it. He's been so patient. We all miss deadlines. It's really, really wonderful. This is my first time coming to Ireland. I would really love to obviously thank Remy for hiring me 3 years ago when I had a really strange time in my interview and talked about women's rights within the Bauhaus. I would love to thank everyone who is here and who listened to me for half an hour. I hope it was a little bit interesting. Please ask me so much later. I love chatting art. Yeah, neat. Thank you.